but
completely. Well, and what's funny there is he's from New England, right? From the area. And it's like, oh man, wild. All right. Looks like everything's setting up. So with that said, I'm sorry, we're just chatting about it started on The Last Dance and then somehow got to last week's episode. But welcome and thanks for pulling up to the Midweek Midrange. I'm your host, Parker Ainsworth. You may recognize me and my name from the Belly Up Sports website, or my voice from our weekly, just over a year old Effin' Sports show with Shaka Cummings. That comes out on Mondays. I'm joined by NBA writers. First one, Jamal Simmons. Jamal, how you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. How you doing?
I'm good. And then I'm also joined by a basketball and baseball writer for Belly Up Sports, Graham Wallace. Graham, how you doing, man?
Doing well. Happy to be with you guys.
Good deal. So anyone who missed last week's show or didn't get to pull up last week or hadn't seen the replay on YouTube or whatnot, I am a Rockets fan. That's why I got my Rockets hat on tonight as we were playing the Sixers, and it is not going well. We just got into the second half, about halfway through the third quarter. I don't know if you guys are following this live, but no Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid had some stuff going on with him in the first half, and we gave up like a bajillion first half threes, which is funny because I thought we were bad at defending the rim, but apparently we're bad at defending all of it. And we had a good defense there for about a 6-game stretch, and no longer we're down. I guess they just cut it to 24. So
that's being nice.
So that's me and my Rocket stuff. But I want to hear from y'all. So Jamal, let's start with you. Tell me. You're in Colorado. Talk to me about basketball and fandom and kind of where you start.
So, yeah, as you know, I'm from Colorado, more so the Colorado Springs area. But as far as the sports scene goes, I mean, everybody knows that Colorado is basically Broncos country. And I don't think it's really going to change anytime soon. However, I will say that the Denver Nuggets, their progress the last 2 to 3 years has really kind of changed the thinking of fans around in the country. Well, Maybe not so much the country, but definitely the state. And then of course, you got the Avalanche who are coming up, and then those sorry Rockies. Let's just be real.
Yeah, they're projected to lose over 100 games.
It's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting time for a Colorado sports fan.
One, have you always been a Colorado sports fan? I know you've been there a few years now, but was that where your team was a little kid too, or how'd you get into the Nuggets and the Colorado scene?
So it actually started like really from the beginning because I was born here and just growing up, especially a big John Elway fan. So that's I think where the fandom really started. But then as I got older, yeah, I like football, but I love basketball more. So of course I was all over the MJ, Kobe, Shaq, all those other great teams and players that have come through the years. But I'm always going to have strong ties to Colorado. That's just always the way it's always been. And now to see the Nuggets finally making some footing in the NBA, I think it's really starting to get to a point where, hey, I think everybody in the NBA circles really need to start taking notice of what's going on here in Denver.
And we'll break into that a little bit later. I'm interested to hear, though, as someone who's watched it grow, for lack of a better phrase, over the last few years, how you've been watching it and what insights you got. So, Graham, talk to us a little bit. You're a baseball and a basketball guy. You got some Canada roots. You've got some New York roots right now. Right? So talk us through where did you start being a basketball fan and how did your interactions with basketball start?
Yeah, it's going to kind of age me a little bit, but when I first got into basketball, it was a little bit before we got a team in Toronto, before the Raptors came along, and I just remember looking at some basketball cards at my friend's house and NBA on NBC, Bob Costas, the song, the monologue, the whole thing, and the team I was kind of drawn to at first was the old rough and tumble New York Knicks, Charles Oakley, John Starks, Patrick Ewing, because they were on TV all the time, and then the other team I really kind of liked before the Raptors came along was Shaquille O'Neal and the Orlando Magic, Penny Hardaway. They were a really fun team to watch, and they were really kind of coming up around that time. But then a couple years later, I remember watching that first Raptors game with my dad. Alvin Robertson dropped 30. We beat the New Jersey Nets, and pretty rough season after that. But it's been a lot of fun, obviously culminating in the championship a couple of years ago. And, it's been a lifelong Hoops fan since then, for sure.
Well, and the Toronto Raptors fan, the way the team represents a whole country in a lot of ways, right? Because the Vancouver thing moved on real quick, always fascinating. And it's, not that people all the way over in Vancouver identify with Toronto as much, but like I feel like a lot of Canada ties themselves to Toronto, and not because of Drake or anything, but because that's where the sports, that's where the major American. I mean, hockey's obviously a very different deal, but like you got the
Yeah.
Blue Jays, you got your hat on, right? You got the
Yeah.
Raptors, like that's, and I guess the Buffalo Bills are a close football team, but like that's really they talked about moving Toronto recently too.
That's true.
Yeah. They had this series when they would be playing in the Sky Dome. I still call it that, Rogers Center or whatever, but they didn't really do that well. And I don't think the players felt like it was a home game. So that kind of got scrapped after a few years. But that's the team I root for. They're just about an hour drive from me now. But
Buffalo, well, they're fun, and then as a Houston guy, the Blue Jays just got a lot better, and we got a little bit worse, I think, when our guys just a couple weeks ago.
Well, we almost got Brantley too, so sorry, not to whatever, but at least he kept Brantley. Yeah,
I will say that was the next day. It was like they got Springer the next day. Like, oh man, and then we got to keep Brantley. That was like the icing. But the good old days maybe falling apart for me as a Houston sports fan. I guess I'm just a glutton for punishment. Punishment including the weather outside. I want to mention the weather outside, not because nearly a foot of snow in a week is a lot of snow anywhere else in the world, but apparently in Texas, everything is bigger, including the reaction to snow. So if something goes wrong and like recording shuts out or something because like my Wi-Fi cuts out, I've been pretty lucky and fortunate not to have that happen so far. But anyone watching, or if the recording just cuts for some random reason, I'm sorry. We're on ERCOT. We've all figured out what that is. I didn't know what that was about 4 days ago, and now I do. But anyway, this is the Belly Ups Sports Midweek Midrange show. It's an all basketball show. We intentionally bring in some different basketball vantage points from across the site. You can find stuff that Jamal and Graham write both online. You can also find them on different podcasts if you look as they're getting their start going across different networks, I should say. But tonight, we're going to open up with a little bit of hot tea and cold tea. Now, that's because we're brought to you by Yeti Coolers, and I actually bring both of them right here. So I have my hot tea and my cold drink.
Oh, that's nice.
Hot tea, cold tea is brought to you by Yeti Coolers, Cups, and Koozies. Yeti is the go-to shop for keeping things, whether it's trade rumors or gossip or all-star ballots, cold or hot. Yeti is based out of Austin, Texas, kind of like where I spend a lot of time. Check out the links on our social media handles for all your insulated needs while you're tailgating, camping, or your daily life. Yeti is built for the wild. Okay, so hot tea, cold tea is based on the idea, and this is entirely because of like that old Kermit the Frog meme. I say old because I think people still tweet about it, but it's not. I don't think people tweet the straight up Kermit face anymore. But he's sitting there like sipping his tea, right? And it's like, oh, he's sipping his tea because the point's been made, and whether that tea is hot or cold is the kind of things we're going to dive into here. We're going to look at some rumors, gossip, and headlines that are either going to be piping hot or something like we drink here in the South, which is a little bit colder iced tea. The first one I want to dive into is since our last recording, the second return of All-Star voting is out. I actually imagine that very quickly the third return will be out because that would be just the way things work. On the last return, the starters were LeBron, Jokic, Kawhi, Steph Curry, Luka on the Western side making it, Durant, Giannis, Joel, Bradley Beal, and Kyrie Irving on the Eastern side making it. Of course, we know that after a couple years ago, they draft and don't have to play with East or West, but the two leading vote getters, LeBron and KD at this point, would be able to draft. I don't know what KD's availability is off the top of my head. I guess I can Google that, and a more prepared host might. But the close guys, like the guys that are close to making it in the top five, if a KD can't play or whatever the case may be, Davis, obviously, although he's got his own injury concerns, Paul George, Dame Lillard, and Donovan Mitchell on the Western side, and then Tatum, Butler, Harden, and Jaylen Brown on the Eastern Conference side. So before I dive into any crazy notables, did that blow up y'all's phone the same way last week when that hit? Are you seeing people freak out? Are you seeing any individual spots, or is it kind of cold tea? Is it kind of like, oh, that's what I thought? Let's start with Jamal. What you think?
So I think at this point in time, I think it's cold tea for the time being, because really most of those names that you see on the list is not really it's not names that really jump out at you. It's not really anything that surprises you, because those are most of the notable names in the league right now. But I will say there are a couple of notable names that I think really should have at least have some consideration. I think more so towards the East. I'll throw a name out, Zach LaVine for Chicago. Now, I think the knock on him is that, well, his team is not doing all that well, even though they're in the poorest Eastern Conference. But another name that I think people really need to start paying attention to Julius Randle for the New York Knicks. He has kept them in the playoff mix. They're actually 6th right now, and I honestly didn't actually expect much from the Knicks this year, but with the new coach, a new regime, I think they're finally starting to turn that corner. We still got another half a season to play, but I think Julius Randle should be rewarded to at the very least be on the team.
Well, and Jamal brings up a good point that this is starters, and that does, the rest of the team does get filled out a little bit differently, but we're seeing some fan vote trends, which is interesting because you'd think a big city like New York, Graham, right? Like New York City, the Mecca right there. You would think that they would have some more say in getting a guy like Randall in. Are you seeing a lot of what you'd call cold tea, or are you kind of like Jamal, where you think the hot team might be and who makes the rest of the roster, not necessarily the starters?
I mean, it's mostly chalk if you look at it. Most of those names that you mentioned are the same guys that I voted for as well, with the exception of Bradley Beal. I mean, he's a great player, but the Wizards are terrible this year. And the guy I want to see get more votes, I'm going to sound like a homer here, but I really don't care, is Fred VanVleet. People continue to underestimate this guy. He set a Raptors record, 54 points earlier this month. People are going to continue to underestimate him. He's 6 feet tall. He was undrafted. But the guy can play, and he needs to be higher than he is. He's number 10 right now, if I'm not mistaken. I'd like to see him get into that top 6. I think he's better than Zach LaVine. I think he's better than Colin Sexton. And, none of those guys have even been to the playoffs. This guy's an NBA champion, and he was a big part of why they won the title. Everyone just thinks, Kawhi Leonard, Ibaka, Siakam. But I definitely would like to see Fred VanVleet get some more votes there for sure.
Well, I thought it was interesting when I looked at it, again, knowing I had a Canadian on the cast here for a second, I was paying attention. He's the only Raptor I saw on the Eastern Conference list, which is always fascinating because, Lowry was a big time part of the game. When I think about how the game played out very literally a year ago, like Lowry taking charge as an All-Star game was kind of a storyline. And then Siakam is, this young budding talent when they won it all 2 years ago. And it's like, where's he gone? Fred VanVleet's the only Raptor on the list. As someone that watched him a little more close than I do, would you say that that's fair, unfair, or is that just kind of the way the world is?
I'm okay with it because Fred's the guy I want to see in the game. Pascal got his chance last year. He started. And really, if you look at the way last season unfolded after the restart, he really didn't play that well in the bubble. He didn't start out this season very well. And he's had 3 games when he took a shot at the end of the game to either win the game or tie the game, which happened in Minnesota Sunday night. He missed the layup and they lost the game. It was a really tough loss. He's had in between his tough start and now he's played pretty well, but I think he's just a little bit below an all-star level. I would say below Julius Randle as well. A great point by Jamal. He definitely deserves it this year. Lowry, maybe career achievement award, but I don't think he's an all-star this season.
It will fit him.
Yeah. OG Anunoby, if he was able to stay healthy, that guy's been a factor defensively, and I think he's ready to really break out. But he just hasn't been on the court quite long enough. So also, they're 2 games below 500, so you can't really campaign for a second all-star. Even me, I love the Raptors, so.
Well, and then as we move to the West, I want to point out the Rockets have now cut it to 21 as we get to the end of the third quarter. Jamal, you're a Western Conference guy like myself as well. Klay Thompson is 8th in voting. Alex Caruso is 10th. Is this just silly fans being silly fans? What like Klay legitimately has played as many NBA minutes this season as I have. And my only sneakers are on the wall behind me. So I don't know what he's doing. So Jamal, what are your thoughts there?
I'm going to try to put this as nice as I possibly can. So I think it's kind of moronic why Klay Thompson, who is not even slated to even play this year because of the unfortunate injury in the offseason, that he's not even going to play. But yeah, he's still getting close to 9 million votes. That just blows my mind. And then Alex Caruso, I'll say this for him. I think he's a very good player, a fan favorite in LA. The Laker fans will tell you that. But to have him there when and all of us know this, that the Western Conference guards is loaded. I mean, almost everywhere you look, whether it's Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, CP3, I give him more love with what he's done with the Suns and Devin Booker. And to see Alex Caruso on that list, it's very strange. That's probably the best I can put it.
Well, and you mentioned CP3 and Booker. Those are two guys that are on the same team that Alex Caruso in my head. I get that he's the white guy that hustles and plays defense. That seems to be a fan favorite in LA every time it happens, right? I just don't get it. The Klay Thompson thing to me too, like I understand that in any year Klay Thompson is playing basketball, he is an all-star. I don't like
that's when that's a starter, honestly.
No doubt.
Yeah, he's tremendous. He's one of the all-time great two-guard wing types, two-way player, 60 points on 11 dribbles. I mean, we all know the stats. But that he's getting that many votes in a year that he literally can't play and couldn't play last year. Like it's not like they're going like recent memory either. Just baffling to me. All right, as we move into the next issue to discuss if it's hot tea or cold tea, I want to make sure that we point out the Rockets are now down 20. Don't call it a comeback, folks. But I will say, Jamal, we're talking about my team stinking and how rough a year it's been for my Rockets. The next topic is, do the Nuggets kind of stink? And before we get upset, Jamal, too much, I want to admit that they do have an MVP candidate, not just because I picked him in preseason, but because Nikola Jokic is really playing like that.
Yes.
They've got another guy in Jamal Murray who we know can break 40 on any night. They've got a lot of depth, and they seem to not have a lot to show for it. And I don't mean like making the playoffs in the West is some easy thing, but I just kind of think we all had higher expectations. So I'm going to start again with Jamal, and then I'll get to Graham, I promise. But Jamal, because this is your squad, do they stink, or am I wrong? What's going on?
So there's a couple factors I think you can put into it. So not to say that it's harping the Nuggets more than any other team, because they're playing in a pandemic. That's first and foremost. And then probably a couple of weeks into the season, when they got off to the slow start, 1-4, you had MPJ who had to miss close to 10 games because of safety and protocol. So that really didn't help their cause, and it's definitely affected his timing as well. But then you also got to realize there are a couple teams in the West who are in the off season and all that. They're really starting to pick up their game. You look at Phoenix. You look at Sacramento, they're starting to come on as of late. Of course, you already know the Clippers, the Lakers, and Golden State. Even though they're not the Golden State of old, they're still there. They still got Steph Curry playing at an MVP level right now. So I think Denver right now, I think they're at a crossroads. I think they're at a crossroads of who do they want to be? Do they want to be just this mid-tier competitor in the West where, hey, they can probably win a series or two, maybe surprise some people, or do they want to actually make that run and try to challenge the Lakers, challenge the Clippers for that top team in the West? Because there's already been a lot of rumors going on about them about making a deal as far as maybe trying to trade for Bradley Beal or probably more inside presence for them. I mean, there's been a lot of talks about it, but to me, it just seems like the Nuggets, like they're kind of stuck in neutral. Like most of us know how good they are, but it's a matter of, can they do it on a consistent basis? Like, you know what you're going to get from LeBron James and Anthony Davis. You know what you're going to get from Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. But the Nuggets, can they do it on a night and day basis? We just don't know. You see it from Nikola Jokic. Well, the big question mark, I think, as a matter of fact, there's two of them. What are you going to get from Jamal Murray, and who is the real MPJ right now? I think those are the two main questions that the Nuggets are facing right now, and that will really decide where their season is going to go.
So,
yeah, I kind of. Oh, sorry.
I was going to toss to you, Graham, and say as
Okay.
a non-biased observer, right? Because that's not your team. Do you think it's hot tea? Do the Nuggets kind of stink and we are all deceived, or is it colder than that? Is it really just not that big a deal? It's just like you're saying, it's kind of the way the season's gone so far. It'll shake out quickly.
I think it's like warm tea. I kind of went back and forth on this one as the week kind of unfolded. The first time I looked, I kind of did a deep dive in their stats. I'm like, okay, they're a top 5 offense if you look at the advanced stats. And their defense, I believe right now they're about 16th. So they're middle of the pack. For me, as a Canadian guy, I've been waiting for Jamal Murray to burst out. A couple of years ago in the playoffs, and then last year, that matchup with Donovan Mitchell, it was magic. And I think everybody, not just in Canada, like everybody in the NBA is just waiting for him to take that next step. Be a 20-plus point scorer, or be more efficient, or be more consistent. And he really hasn't done it. They had a really nice win against the Lakers. Sorry, I'm trying to center myself. A really nice win against the Lakers. I was saying, maybe they're just getting some bad breaks and things are going to start turning around for them. But then they look lifeless against Boston on the weekend. And then, I look at the box score in that game. They're actually missing a lot of their key players right now. Sorry, I wrote it down here because I couldn't quite believe it. Sorry, but they were missing Monte Morris, PJ Dozier, Will Barton missed the game for personal reasons. And then I think about Michael Porter Jr., he had 0 points in that game. He's really showing himself to be a liability, especially on the defensive end. He has 40 total assists, like in over 500 minutes. The guy's unbelievable sometimes. I'm not saying they should give up on him. He's almost 40% from downtown and like almost 60% from 2-point range. But he really hasn't broke out the way a lot of people thought he would. So much promise he showed last year. And the other thing I'm just going to mention quickly, Bull. Why can't they find minutes for this guy? Isaiah Hartenstein's playing. Who's their other big they just drafted? Zeke Naji. He's a nice looking player, but you have a 7'2" stretch power forward who could run and dunk and shoot threes, and you're not playing him. I don't get it. Maybe he's not as good as we thought he was.
Well, and so my thing on the Nuggets is might be a hot take, not hot tea on their end. I almost feel like they got too many guys. Like, how do you get time for an MPJ to get his rhythm and a Bol to get his rhythm and still give, like, Jokic needs to be in shape, like need to work himself into shape enough to play his 40, 35, 38 minutes, right? And Jamal Murray needs to get his 36, 38 minutes. And I think, and not to say I think Jokic looks in shape this year. I just mean like those guys need their time as well. There was talk about a Gary Harris trade at some point that is or may happen or whatnot.
You're still thinking about it.
And I know that on the Rocket side of things, not just because I'm the beat guy for Belly Up, but it did look like there was actual heat to the idea that there was a rumor when they were in the Harden sweepstakes with other teams. I think the deal there would have been like, would he have been more happy there? And so then did they get a discontent guy, and that kind of sunk all that, right? But I imagine that if you're a young guy, right, if you're an MPJ at 20 years old, if you're Bol, if you're any of those guys that were probably considered assets a month ago, I'm not sure if at 20 years old you've ever been traded before. So like, how do you mentally deal with that? Like imagine your employer is like, hey, you got to move to Houston right now. like you got to be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the business. I don't mean to say no other player in any other pro sports going through that, but if you're a 20-year-old NBA player, it's certainly you've had control over where you play, with the exception of the NBA draft. Like this whole time, that could be a lot. I feel like they got a lot going on, and they've got so much talent. And if anyone is listening to this and has not watched them play because they're in seventh in the West and whatever, I'm telling you, Nikola Jokic is so much fun to watch play. There's like plays every night where you're just like, what is going on? How is a 7-footer doing that?
I keep saying to myself, like, there is no way in my right mind that a man at his size can do the things that he can do, especially passing the ball. I don't think there's another big man passer like him in the league ever.
Well, and I'm a 6-foot guy that likes to think of myself as a chubby point guard in a 6-foot body, and he once upon a time said he was a chubby point guard in a 7-foot body. So I think we're a lot alike. I don't know, mate.
One last thing on the Nuggets is they don't have a defensive stopper. Sorry, we can move on to the next, but like last year, Torrey Craig, I think he was a great role as kind of a 3-and-D guy. Oh yeah, the Nuggets guy is hearing what I'm saying. Yeah, and.
You've been speaking. You're talking to the choir. That was one of the moves. I almost wanted to chuck my hat outside in that cold and not get it back. That was one move that Denver should have not made, because you have to contend with Kawhi and you have to contend with LeBron. Yep. Why get rid of one of your best wing defenders? Why?
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I'll just wrap it up like this. I think they're first or second round. I don't see them going all the way to the conference finals unless they do something drastic. But they're in that mid tier.
Well, and I will say that, they came back from 3-1 last year, but if you'd have told me they lost in game 7 last year after coming back from 3-1, like it wouldn't have been that shocking, right? They did make the Western Conference Finals last year. So I'm sure they thought, and I think Jamal attests, like most people in the Colorado area thought that that's a team that ought to get back, right?
You would think, but once again, the West is loaded, and if you're not coming to play every night, it's going to show on the scoreboard.
Speaking of a loaded West and the greater Colorado area, because it's a neighboring state, I guess, we got to look at the Utah Jazz. So I'm going to ask you guys if you guys think the Utah Jazz are hot tea or cold tea. I'm not sure which one of those that makes them real or not, but I'll let y'all think about it. Let's have some stats. They're currently, as of when we started recording, I don't think they finished playing since then. They are 23-5. They have the best record in the NBA. They are on the slower side of pace. They're in the bottom third of the league in pace. They have the second best offensive rating, or second best defensive rating.
Yep.
Fourth best offensive rating. The highest percentage of shots taken from behind 3-point line, and doing it very well. But also, they were up 3-1 last year and lost to Denver in the first round. Lost 4-1 to Houston the year before, 4-1 to Houston the year before that, and got swept in the second round by Golden State the year before that. Although, to be fair, the Golden State series was at their peak and without Donovan Mitchell. So,
yes,
Graham, talk to me about this, because you brought up some stats earlier talking about the Nuggets. The stats on the Jazz make me think that they could be for real.
Right.
But are they?
It's hard to say they're not, because like you said, top 5 in offense and defense, number 1 in net rating. But until they beat the Lakers or the Clippers or whoever they have to face in a 7-game series, I can't really see them going to the finals. To me, this is a team, they could maybe go to the Western Conference Finals. I just don't believe them until they do it. I just can't. This is a superstar league. Donovan Mitchell is a really nice player. Rudy Gobert is a max player somehow, even though he averages like 12 points a game. But to me, this is not a championship team. They're having a really nice regular season. Milwaukee had a really nice regular season last year and the year before that too. And we all saw how that turned out. So to me, the ceiling for this team is Western Conference Finals. Sorry.
Interesting. Right. Again, I don't know if calling them not for real is hot or cold tea. We got to shake that out.
Oh, sorry. I guess that's lukewarm on them. So.
Yeah, sure. We'll call it lukewarm. Jamal, what do you think?
I've wrestled for this like the past couple of weeks, because we actually, as you know, Denver had stopped their previous 15-game winning streak. So if I have one answer, I'd probably say warm for now, because as my man said, it all depends on how they fare against the LA teams, because right now that's really the pinnacle of the West right now. How do you fare against the Lakers and the Clippers? I want to be a homer and say we can throw our hat in that mix, but until we start playing better defense and get more consistency from our players, I just don't see it. Because right now Utah has what we don't have, and that's a better defensive team and an actual rim protector. And right now they got and then Donovan Mitchell, I think he's really starting to come into his own. What we as Denver thought that Jamal Murray would do after his showing in the bubble against Donovan Mitchell. So it'll be interesting to see the next couple of weeks.
So with their rim protector, do you think that the Jazz are for real?
I think so. You mean you eventually have to play defense. You can't just expect to score 125, 130 every single night and expect to win. You got to be able to stop somebody.
Yeah, my Rockets tried that for a couple years and it worked out very well. I will say my biggest knock on the Jazz is unfortunately something I don't think, and y'all feel free to jump in and tell me I'm wrong, I don't think they can fix the issues I see with them in the regular season. And that means to say, like, I don't think they can make me feel like I'm wrong about them until the playoffs, because my deal with them is for 4 or 5 years now, I feel like I've watched them fail to make an adjustment in a 7-game series. Like they're playing Denver last year. They get up 3-1, and then Denver shifts the focal point of their offense off of Point Jokic to Jamal Murray, and they're fine. We don't know what to do anymore. They lose they blow a 3-1 lead. The year before, they come in the defense in the was it the first round? Yeah, the first round the year before, where they're guarding Harden like from behind, and they're going to force him into Gobert for the floater. He had a bunch of assists that series. He like broke 30 twice, and one of them was in the one loss of a gentleman's sweep, right? But like that wasn't a great look. They didn't ever make an adjustment because they just kept kicking to open 3-point shooters. Mm-hmm. The year before that, in the second round, they tried to do some different coverages on the pick and roll and different matchups, and it didn't help out with the Capella roll factor. Obviously, they had Capella that year. I feel like as I watched them, they failed to make adjustments, and mostly because I watched them play a couple Rocket series, so I got to see it firsthand. And then the bubble, the 3-1 thing was a lot of fun, right? But like the adjustments that you have to make over a 7-game series, that if you want to give the credit to the coach Vogel, that's fine. I think the deal in LA is LeBron, right? Like LeBron does that for them. He says, here's what we're going to do to beat this team, right? That's the thing he's really good at. I would give some credit to Kerr and what he did with them in Golden State. Part of that's also you have a lot of adjustments at your toolbox when you got Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. I think when you watch that though, and then you're a Toronto guy, like I think one of Nick Nurse's best things is over the course of that final series against the Warriors, right? Mm-hmm. As the Warriors roster changed, they changed what they did defensively, right? Yeah. I think that those kinds of and this is like Quinn Snyder's a good NBA coach and a good story. He's worked his way up from the G League, and before that, I think he was in low level college and stuff like that. But I haven't seen them make that adjustment in a 7-game series, and I don't know how they fix that before getting to the playoffs. Like I'm just going to think that about them until they get there. And I don't mean to poo-poo on anyone in Utah listening or watching because they are talented. It's just
it's fair game.
I don't know how
they might have the best record in the NBA this year. That could very well happen, but I agree very much. They have to prove it when it matters in the playoffs, no doubt.
And last time I checked, best record in the league don't mean anything.
Was 73-9, didn't get a ring, right?
Exactly.
All right. So speaking of 73-9 with Dubs, we're going to talk a little about Draymond. So this was honestly, if you're peek behind the curtain here for folks watching and listening or watching this on YouTube later, like when I gave these guys kind of a list of ideas for topics earlier in the week, Draymond had not said this yet. And so I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on this, but Draymond had a long statement, and I thought when I copy and pasted this into the Word document I got for notes right here, I'd like read the whole thing. It's really long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. But Draymond talked for about 3 minutes, and so I'm going to cut myself short and say his talk was basically a combination of like, guys have a right to be upset. We need to hold teams and guys to the same standards. And he took one to talk about like people got upset with James Harden and Anthony Davis for getting upset about trading. But then that day, Drummond and Blake Griffin had just been put on the trading block and are no longer suiting up. And he said, how can we have both those things happening in the league? He talked about Kyrie and taking care of his mentals for a second, which I thought was fascinating because I haven't heard a lot of players step up outside of the Brooklyn organization for Kyrie. And so I want to toss it to you, Graham, to start. Obviously the clip is out there. I'm not saying anything that you got people watching this can't go find, but what did you think about Draymond's statement? Did he have some backing to him? Has he got some hot tea points, or is it really kind of cool just Draymond being Draymond?
I mean, it's definitely Draymond being Draymond, but I think it's hot. I kudos to him for speaking up and saying what's on a lot of players' minds, I'm sure. And I found myself when he said it, I was like, damn, he's right. I never even questioned it. Like, oh, Cavs are sitting out Drummond. Sounds kind of the same. And Pistons are sitting out Griffin. I'm like, oh, that's just what they're doing. They're protecting their investment. But couldn't the player say, well, I want to play? What happens then? Obviously, it got really ugly in Houston with Harden. He somehow magically gained like 50 pounds and then lost it all in one day. I don't know how that happened.
I need the second half of that diet if you want to afford it, James.
He maneuvered his way to where he wanted to go, and that's what basketball, the culture has kind of become. Is it right or wrong? I'm not here to say that, but it's definitely a slanted slope. It's a double standard when it comes to players and teams. So good for him for speaking up. I definitely agree with it. And tea's hot.
Tea's hot. Jamal, what do you think? Hot tea out there, West and Draymond?
Oh, it has to be hot tea because he's been saying exactly what I've been thinking for years. And it's definitely not the first time where you see, no matter if it's a low like a prospect, mid-tier player, or a superstar player, like this always happens with teams trying to protect their investment. Like I get it to an extent, but at the same time, like you got guys who live, breathe, and eat basketball. Like that's all they do. That's all they want to do. So for Cleveland and Detroit to basically take that out of Drummond and Blake Griffin's hands, it's like, what are you doing? And so I think there has to be a certain respect level as far as owners or GMs to the players, like saying, hey, we're thinking about making this move. You're probably going to be moved within the next 24, 48 hours. Like, I don't think it takes a lot to really like say, hey, out of respect. Because I think that's what's missing on the business side. Because and Draymond brought out this great quote that, so like a James Harden or Anthony Davis, like, they want to be traded. Oh, they're the villains because they want something better for themselves. Like, it shouldn't be that way. It's just the way it is. And I think that's really sports in general since the turn of the century. Because I think now the players, I think they finally understand, like, hey, we have a little bit more power than you think. And I think the owners and GMs are really, I won't say they're feared by it, but it's definitely something that they notice.
Yeah, well, and I think the interesting thing is if you bring up and look at specifically in the players he mentions, they're for the most part stars, right? Like
Yes.
he didn't say people aren't asking. I don't mean to poop on Kelly Oubre, but he didn't bring up Kelly Oubre's name, right? Like he didn't bring up his teammate. Or I'm sitting here watching the Rockets. The game is currently 16 points, but Ben McLemore is not getting the same kind of sway that James Harden did, right? But it is interesting to think that like these guys are the ones making the product we're watching, and I think people often get lost in this idea that, well, they make millions of dollars to do it, so they need to do what they're told. When the truth is, they're working a job that's way cooler than the rest of ours. Or I don't know, maybe not cooler than y'all's, but like,
yes,
they're getting told
same
the same way I'm getting told that, hey, you have to show up to the office tomorrow to teach, even though it's snowing or not or whatever. Like, we don't have to go tomorrow, thank God. But like, whatever the case may be, like the same way we get told that and wait till I got the email about tomorrow today at 3, and I'll get the email about Friday tomorrow at 3. Like the same way I get that kind of things. I'm a worker. They're a worker. When they get their email at 3, it's like, hey, you're on a plane to Houston tomorrow. Hey, you're on a plane to Toronto, Canada. You're moving out of the country. Right? They're going across that kind of stuff. And I think people get lost in that because they make so much money. And the other thing I think that gets lost in this is that even if you want to admit that that's just the ugly nature of the business, like this idea that it's 2021 now, we're learning more about mental health. Like, do you need to if you're going to take 2 weeks off like Kyrie, did you need to tell your boss? You probably need to tell your boss. But like, if you need to take you need to take a little bit of time, or like if you're the way, because I watched it closely, James Harden's last couple weeks in Houston, he like hurts his ankle, misses a game, and then comes back. And he's just like not involved. He's like passing the ball. Okay, y'all got it. I'm not doing it, because he doesn't want to be there. Right. And so like, it came off as like, oh, this disinterested, whatever. Like, there's also the aspect of like, he knows that he wants to spend the next couple of years of his prime, the last bit of it, somewhere else. And he's hurt his ankle, and he's like, I'm not going to push this and get worse because I don't know what's coming next. Right. It's weird to think about. Like, there's the aspect of like, do your job, and like, you're under contract and you sign that contract, and you if you wanted that, you should have done the LeBron James, Kevin Durant thing and signed a bunch of 1-and-1s or whatever. But there's also this idea that like I can put in my 2 weeks notice and quit my job, like, and I can go work somewhere else. So
yeah, but if you gave up though, Parker, you'd get fired, right? Like if you just went to class and just started chewing bubble gum, your feet up on the desk, weren't assigning.
Hey, don't give away my lesson plan now. Okay?
Harden gave up on that team and that city, that organization. He said he gave everything, and just like Shaq, I'm going to say no, he didn't. Does everyone forget about the like 38 million like 3-pointers that they missed in that game 7 in a row against Golden State? They should have gone to a finals, and he gave up. So I think that's where all the vitriol comes from. Vince Carter did it for Toronto back in the day. It's just part of sports now. People just give up on their teams when they're not happy anymore. And I personally, I hate it, but
I think what I'm getting at though on the mental side of it is like, people assume that they have to like enjoy it that day, or like whatever, like, because there are certainly days where I'm like, man, I'm having a bad day and I don't want to be here right now, right? Or there, those kind of things. And I think that's an element lost. And I think the interesting thing about Draymond again is that his news came in light of that day 2 teams had just said, you can't do that, like, we're not going to play these 2 guys today, right? Like, again, like I guess theoretically that could happen in any workplace. I don't know that makes it right though, right? Like the idea that we're going to put these assets that are human beings on the shelf is a little wonky.
It is.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate. And I think another thing that people really don't take into account of, like, think of these people like their families. Like, if they have wives, if they have kids, like that has to be considered too, because now you're asking them to move either across the country or into another country in general. So that's another thing that people really fail to realize. Like, there's more to just the players involved. Like, you gotta take everything into consideration.
Our last hot tea, cold tea.
Sure.
We're gonna actually go back to what Graham said about Shaq, because the Inside the NBA is getting a documentary drop on March 4th, which is weirdly closer than I realized when I threw that topic out there earlier this week, because it's already after the midway point of February. And the inside story, here's a quote from the website, is a 4-part documentary series that takes a look back at 30 years of Inside the NBA and its Emmy Award-winning crew, Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, and Shaquille O'Neal. So, first of all, is this more than a nostalgia play? I want hot tea, cold tea kind of takes to you guys. We'll start back with Graham. Talk to me. What do you think?
I can't see a lot of new things. There might be a part when they kind of peek into the future a little bit, but I think it's going to be a lot of looking back. 30 years? I think it's going to be entertaining. I think it's going to be hilarious. I think it's going to be emotional, especially when they talk about Ernie and some of the battles that he's been through. I just actually watched the trailer again, doing my prep for the show, and I'm fired up. I'm just wondering, I'm from Canada, man. I don't know when it's going to be available for me. So if you guys get your hands on that, you got to send it over to me.
If you find an illegal stream, you may or not be able to send it to Grandma.
Right. VPN is going to block that.
All right. So Jamal, talk to us, because I got to be honest, as someone who just found out the two of us are born the same calendar year, I didn't realize Inside the NBA had been on 30 years. I kind of thought it started when Charles Barkley showed up. So to me,
you wouldn't be wrong.
Well, so what were your thoughts when you saw it come out?
I'll be very honest. When I first heard the announcement, I was like, I was a fanboy, because I've grown up watching the NBA, and even before TNT, like you're talking CBS and NBC. Like NBC was the pinnacle, I think, of basketball, or at least close to it. And now TNT has kind of taken that baton and ran with it the past 30 years. I can't even believe it's been 30 years since then. But to see Ernie almost every Thursday night having a marquee matchup, him, Shaq, Charles, Kenny, all those guys, like, I'll be honest, that to me, that would be my personal dream job. Just to sit up there, clown all day, and just talk ball, because it's and they just have fun. They're themselves. And I think when I actually see the documentary and hopefully get to see another side of these guys that sometimes what we don't see on TV, I think it'll be great for the fans to see, okay, here are the ins and outs of what goes on, like for every show they prepare for and all these things. I think it'll be, honestly, I can't wait. I think it's hot tea, and I'm anxious to see what I see on March 5th, I think it is.
Well, and I agree too. I think it's weird timing, because it is this nostalgic show for basketball fans, like any generation really. It's been around, like I said, 30 years, but I remember watching it as soon as I got into it. It was already well established. Like, it feels like it's been around forever. They always have fun personalities. They've even recently added like different night shows with like Dwayne Wade and Candace Parker, which is a great matchup. That, like, the other day I forget what game was happening, because the fun part was them, and they were talking about like Chicago high school hoops, because that's where Candace and Dwayne are from. And I was like, oh dang, that's a real cool connection I wouldn't even thought of, right? And I will say that it's an interesting time to launch it, because they have that newness going. Where's the show going? Can Shaq and Ernie and Chuck and Kenny do this forever? Graham alluded to some of the stuff Ernie's been through, and they're also like in the limelight right now, kind of, because the Durant,
my hope is that
did I lose you? But I was going to say is right now you've got. Yeah, I look at right now though, they've got LeBron and Durant and these guys kind of criticizing Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley as haters, and now we're going to look back at like how much fun this show's been, and like. That's not to say I haven't had fun watching the show. I just also think that that's an interesting, weird time that, like, I'm sure they didn't plan it like that, but like they had the Donovan Mitchell quote the other day when Shaq's like, I didn't think of you as a whatever player. What do you think about that? And he's like, next question. Like, he's like, what? He's like, whatever. And that was funny. That's part of the entertainment to me, but it's an interesting time to be launching this doc. But man, I've been watching Ernie and Kenny on TV for a long time, and I'm excited to see kind of some behind the scenes. I also think that we're about to see how much work Ernie Johnson really does. Like, yes, I think we think about like, oh, this is like, you pull up, you watch a podcast, you do whatever. It's the same kind of thing, right? Just like on national TV in Suits. And it's like, man, I'm telling you right now, I bet Ernie does a lot of work.
Well, he keeps it on the rails, right? Sorry, Jamal, but it would have went way off track. He kind of, okay, you guys are bantering about this, or maybe Charles said something controversial, or him and Shaq are going like, okay, we got to move on to this, and that's part of the fun of watching it is him trying to keep it together a little bit, right?
He's probably the best mediator in all sports, and and to your point, Parker, I think probably the timing of it is look at where the All-Star game is.
Yeah. Atlanta TNT turn. That's very, very good point. I hadn't even really thought of like that is, dang, that's probably exactly part of it. It's like the All-Star game comes out if it's early March. The All-Star game's in mid-March, right? That's exactly the time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that was our hot tea, cold tea. Right now, we're gonna dive into a section called Wednesday Night Rights, and I don't know if the guys have notes, and so I'll give them a second to pull up what they got. But what I'm gonna say is Wednesday Night Rights is a chance for us all to share something you either wrote or read about basketball this week. And this is a chance, to talk about some of the great stuff that's on Belly Up Sports, but also as guys that work for Belly Up Sports and the same stuff that goes into our, bank of stuff that we're working with as we read across the country from all different kinds of great outlets. So as long as you, cite your sources for a little bit, Jamal, what you got? What'd you read this week? What'd you write this week?
Well, I'm actually kind of working on another Denver piece. It's really trying to, as we were speaking on earlier, kind of like where the Nuggets are in the grand scheme of things as far as the NBA goes. Like they're reaching a crossroad point. Are they satisfied with trying to be a mid-tier team, or do they want to take that next step to be a real championship contender? So I'm hoping to try to have that done within the next week or two, because right now things are still in fluid with their play right now. As a matter of fact, I want to pull out whatever rest of my hair I have right now, because they literally were up almost 20 points on the Wizards, and now they're trailing at the half. So it's like,
ouch.
It's infuriating.
Low-key, that makes me feel better, though, because the Rockets just blew in the Wizards on Monday. And the Wizards also beat the Celtics on... Anyway, you have... And I asked Jamal, if you're writing this, are you making projections as to things they should do, or just pointing out problems they got to address?
So it might be a little bit of both. So I think the projections, if they stay pat, I think they'll be maybe at their best, maybe a 4 or 5 seed. And that's being kind.
Interesting.
But I think if they make like a big splash trade, like I've heard Bradley Beal's name, Victor Oladipo's name has been tossed around as far as a trade. I think if either one of those deals go through, I think the Nuggets may try to make a jump to maybe a third seed at most, because it's going to be tough to go past both LA teams or Utah for that matter.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Graham, I've noticed that a lot of, with how much baseball off-season talk's been going on recently, a lot of your written stuff's been on baseball. What have you been writing or reading about basketball lately?
Well, I read your piece about the national anthem. I enjoyed that. I definitely had the same thought on the weekend watching the hockey game, actually, just like as a Canadian, even I'm like, why do we need to have the national anthem played before the game? There's no one here except for the players. It seems kind of pointless. I read another one earlier on NBA.com about Pascal Siakam. He's kind of going back to his game. He's shooting more around the basket and he's shooting less 3-pointers. And as a result, he's actually shooting a much higher percentage from the 3-point line when he decides to do that. And then another one today. Sorry, I read a lot. It was actually about Michael Porter Jr. and how he's kind of become a bit of a liability defensively. I actually think, Jamal, if they want to take a big swing, they'd probably have to trade a guy like him. He's the only guy on the roster that, besides maybe Jamal Murray, that teams are kind of salivating around. But he's been disappointing enough that I think they would consider it. If they want to land a big name guy like that, I think they need to do something like that. Shameless plug, if you want to read my baseball projections, it's up on the Belly Up site now, kind of what I think what's going to go on the baseball season upcoming. But sorry.
Well, and spoiler, I'm sure. Spoiler alert.
We're going to have to talk offline about my Braves. We're going to have to talk about that.
No doubt. I got them in first, man.
I'm sure you have them in the World Series against the Astros, though, right? I mean, I'm sure that's the crux of this, is the Astros are back in the World Series. Everything's back to normal.
I'm pretty sore about the whole trash can thing, man. I'm not really over that. But we got Springer, so it's okay.
You would not be the only one. The funny thing is, I actually have in my classroom that I teach in, I have a World Series banner or whatever, just because I got it back when that happened, because I was like, oh, this is a happy time. And then when that news broke, in January of 2020. A buddy came up and like legitimately like had like cut it, like the little circle stickers, had cut an asterisk out of a circle sticker and slapped it on. I was like, man, he slapped it right on my banner. It was great trash talking about my buddy Don. So if I look at the things I did over the week, I mean, obviously I could plug the stuff I wrote. I wrote a little bit about the anthem that Graham alluded to. Kind of wondering like why Mark Cuban is shutting it down when he's shutting it down and those kind of things. I looked at stuff in the Rockets. Obviously, I write a Rockets roundup every week, and so I'm waiting to finish up this game, and I may finish that article up tomorrow. And then I wrote a little about sneakers because I like sneakers. But the stuff I read, other people wrote on Belly Up Sports. I want to plug Kyle Edwards on the Wizards. I read about that leading into the Wizards Rockets game. Kind of, if I'm being honest, because I thought that might be a chance for us to break our losing streak. And instead it was not. But I will say it was interesting to see like an interesting perspective on a Wizards fan talking about John Wall coming back to the city because John Wall has been very good for Houston amidst a lot of other not good things. And then one thing I read not on Belly Up Sports that I want to plug a little bit is Washington Lambre is a writer for The Athletic. He also does podcasting called Woke Bros and that kind of stuff. We talked politics, but his sports writing this week, he looked at PJ Tucker, who's near and dear to my heart, not just because Houston Rocket. This goes back to he was at the University of Texas back when I was in middle school and high school, and I was in Austin for that point. And big PJ Tucker guy. I was kind of a tweener-sized kid growing up as far as what position you play in basketball because I was kind of chunky, so I wasn't really guard, but I wasn't very tall. And he was that guy for Texas and very good at it. And I just always love watching PJ Tucker play. And the fact that he's also a sneakerhead and then ends up in Houston, just it came full circle. So I hope he does well. But it was a really, really cool piece in looking at him and his fashion because there's not been a whole lot of great basketball play this year, but a whole lot of look at his fashion. So Washington Lambre Athletic, that was fun to read. The last thing I want to plug here is our last segment. It's called the buzzer beater. Now I want to point out last week, if you watched the show, I got by the buzzer. I got cut off really early making my take. My take was talking about, I was trying to get to like, Tom Brady is not Michael Jordan. Like, let's cut this out because we're at Super Bowl.
Let's not go there.
I got cut off by the buzzer. I was trying to talk too much. Got cut off by the buzzer. If you haven't been able to tell by the end of tonight's podcast, I am a little long-winded. But the point of buzzer beater is everyone gets 24 seconds to get off a take. Right, you get to get off whatever you can get off in 24 seconds. If it lands, we'll call it a make. If you get beat by the buzzer like myself, I guess you kind of miss. Y'all have preference who wants to go first? Because last week we had a guy who wanted to go first because he was coming in hot. Do y'all have either one of you have any takes?
I could go first, Jamal, unless you want to.
All right, I'll have a take.
All right, so I'm going to put the timer up. Hold on 1 second. We got 24-second timer. And I'll count it down in 3, 2, 1, go.
So you can mark it down right here. In July for the NBA Finals, it will be the Philadelphia 76ers and the Los Angeles Lakers. Book it. Both will be 1 seeds, and it will go 7. And honestly, I think Philadelphia will win.
Ooh, okay. With time to spare. Time to spare, kind of what Philly's winning all this year. All right, Graham. That's hot because I don't think, I mean, we talk about the Jazz trail. I think there are plenty of people that don't think Philadelphia is. So that'll be interesting to see. And we may put that on tape in a couple months. Jamal, when we come back to you, I want to talk again.
If I'm wrong, you can mute me.
Hey, no, we got to have you back on the podcast in a couple months now to talk about it. And hopefully I'll be on between now and then as well. But like, I want to have you on in a couple months to talk about it, sure. All right, Graham, your turn. 24 seconds in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, my buzzer beater is in this weird, crazy COVID season. The Toronto Raptors are still Eastern Conference contenders. You cannot count this team out. They're championship tested. Fred VanVleet is a gunner. OG Anunoby, is a defensive stopper. Chris Boucher, most improved player candidate. Don't count the Raptors out. Do it at your own peril. Look out. Hot.
All right, so I got to admit, don't count the Raptors out with the Canadian twist on the word out. That was perfect. I love it. No, I love it. As someone that has a very much Southern Texas thing going on, I love it. All right. I'm going to keep my buzzer down here. I can see it because last time I wasn't directly looking at it. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right, so here's my hot take here is that James Harden is the exact same guy he's always been. He's just doing it in a bigger city like Brooklyn. He led the league in assists a couple times. He can do that. He just didn't have guys like Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Joe Harris, for that matter, to kick it out to. Instead, he was throwing it out to Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker. That's not exactly the same kind of thing as a Kevin Durant type, and that's the reason it looks different as soon as I got cut off again. Whew, okay, he had a big shot last night. He got a big shot last night, and that was my last big shot last night. All right, okay, that's gonna be it for us tonight. Talk to us. Where can people find you on social media? Let's start with Jamal. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Facebook. Also got Instagram as well. I am on Twitter, just not as much, but I'm pretty easy to find. So just look at the name there, and you'll find me.
And Graham, where can people find you?
So just notice my name underneath there. It's spelled a little different. So it's Graham W_Bus, which stands for Belly Up Sports. It's lowercase on Instagram if you want to find me there. Uppercase for the Twitter sphere. So come holler at me. I'm waiting for a comment on one of my stories too. So you can do that if you want to.
So what I'm hearing is to go into Graham's story about the MLB projections on Belly Up Sports and tell him that the Houston Astros are going to win another World Series. No. Obviously, you can follow the show at Midweek Midrange on Instagram and Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel. You can look us up if you want to, didn't catch the whole show tonight, or when you go back and look at old shows, that too, at Midweek Midrange below us. You can follow myself. My other show is at FN Sports. That is every Monday morning. It's a recorded podcast wherever you get your podcast. Another teacher named Shaka Cummings and I sit around and grade sports theses. A, B, C, D, F. Don't flunk with us. And then we also have myself on Twitter and Instagram is at Painsworth512. That's at PAINSWRTH 512, all one word, on Twitter and Instagram. But thank y'all for stopping by, and never be afraid to pull up. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
No problem.